I was 23 years old at the time of the March on Washington 50 years ago. I remember A. Philip Randolph introducing me. I now present to you young John Lewis, the national chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And I stood up and I said to myself, this is it. I looked to my right. I saw hundreds and thousands of young people, many of the young volunteers of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I looked to my left, and I saw many young people, young men, in the trees, trying to get a better view of the podium. Then I looked straight out, and I started speaking.
You know, the speeches, of course, there were many that day. I remembered John Lewis's speech because, you know, here I am, a young guy, and here was this young guy up there.
Everybody was required to give a copy of their speech in advance, except Dr. King, who didn't do that. But John Lewis did. John was saying black people, which was not in common usage then.
Those of us in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee wanted the speech to speak for the hundreds and thousands of young people and people not so young that we were working with in the heart of the Deep South. We had prepared a speech that we thought reflected the feelings, the ideas of the people.
The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was probably at that time the most militant and the most forward in the roughest places. So our speech through John wanted to temper that speech. And we thought that it was the time not to temper the speech. But we also had enough practical politics so that we were willing to have that speech modified, even though it was still a very militant speech.
In the speech, I said something about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I said, where's our party? Some people didn't like that. I said, you tell us to wait. You tell us to be patient. We cannot wait. We cannot be patient. We want our freedom, and we want it now. We're not involved in a serious revolution. The black mass is restless, and some people said, you cannot use the word revolution. And Mr. Randolph came to my rescue and said, there's nothing wrong with the use of the word revolution. There's nothing wrong with black masses. I use it myself sometime.
He talked about what was actually happening in the field, people being beaten and the bombings and how, his life growing up, what he went through, and how we were trying to get the vote. So he was talking about things that we knew about.
But then what people really didn't like, near the end of the speech, I said that we do not see meaningful progress here today. The day will come when we will not confine our marching on Washington, but we may be forced to march through the South the way Sherman did, nonviolently. They said, oh, John, you can't use that. I said, John, that didn't sound like you. That's what Dr. King said. And Mr. Randolph, A. Philip Randolph, says something like, John, we come this far together. Let's stay together. Can we change that? I cannot say no to Dr. King. This man that I admired and loved, he was my inspiration, my hero, and I had so much respect for A. Philip Randolph. So we decided to say something like, if we do not see meaningful progress here today, we will march through certain cities, and I call certain cities around the country.